It began with a photograph that should not have existed. The year was 2003, and in a dusty evidence room of the Nevada State Police, a clerk cataloging unclaimed property stumbled upon a sealed manila envelope. Inside was a small, weather-beaten disposable camera, one of those cheap Kodak models tourists used to buy at gas stations before cell phones replaced them. The plastic was warped from heat, the viewfinder cracked, but when the film was carefully developed, the images that emerged would send a ripple of unease through every investigator who saw them. The first frames were innocent enough. A young couple, smiling in the summer sun, sunglasses perched on their heads, the wide desert sky stretching endlessly behind them. They were identified quickly as Daniel and Emily Harper, a pair of newlyweds from Ohio who had vanished without a trace while vacationing in the American Southwest back in 19. The Harpers had been last seen checking into a roadside motel in New Mexico before heading toward Arizona. Their families had spent years searching for answers, but after endless false leads and no evidence, the case had quietly gone cold. But now, 10 years later, their camera had resurfaced, and with it, disturbing new evidence. As the investigators flipped through the photos, the mood in the room shifted. The first images showed the couple at tourist spots, Emily in front of a roadside dinosaur statue, Daniel grinning beside their rented car, a red Jeep Cherokee. Then came the photos that made everyone fall silent. One frame showed Emily sitting stiffly in the passenger seat at night, her expression frozen, eyes wide and glassy, as though she hadn't realized the photo was being taken. Another showed Daniel's hand reaching toward the lens, his face half blurred, as though he'd been caught off guard. The third image was the worst. A blurry figure standing in the background of a campfire, tall, looming, faceless in the wash of smoke. The final shot was completely dark, except for a single line of light, jagged and harsh, cutting across the frame like a blade. The roll ended there. The camera, according to the evidence label, had been turned in anonymously at a police station in Santa Fe back in 1995, 2 years after the Harpers vanished, but had somehow been misfiled, left undeveloped and forgotten. That fact alone raised questions. Who had turned it in? Why hadn't they said more? And why now, after a decade, did the film finally reveal itself? Detective Claire Morrison, a veteran investigator known for her tenacity, was assigned to reopen the Harper case. She had seen hundreds of disappearances in her career, but something about this one unsettled her. Maybe it was the sheer emptiness of it. No bodies, no car, no trail, just a couple who had gone out into the desert and never come back. Or maybe it was the way Emily's eyes seemed to be looking past the camera in that one frozen frame, as if she had seen something no one else could. Claire spread the photographs across her desk. Late that night, the glow of her desk lamp pooling over them. The Harpers had been married only 4 months. Their trip was supposed to be a celebration, a promise of new beginnings. Instead, it had become a legend whispered among locals along the Arizona-New Mexico border. The couple who checked in, but never checked out. The case file was thin, yellowed with age. Police reports, interviews, a few faded flyers with the Harpers' smiling faces. One motel clerk remembered them, vaguely. Nice couple, paid cash, left early in the morning. Another witness claimed they had stopped at a gas station outside Gallup, asking for directions to Canyon del Muerto. After that, the trail ended. No credit card activity, no confirmed sightings. Their rental Jeep was never found, and yet, the camera existed. Claire leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against her notepad. The question wasn't just what happened to the Harpers. The question was, who wanted their story hidden badly enough to keep this evidence buried for 10 years? Her instincts told her this wasn't simply a matter of incompetence at an overworked police station. Someone had wanted those images delayed, and the longer she stared at the blurred figure in the firelight, the stronger she felt the weight of something pressing back, as if the story wasn't finished, only paused. That night, she couldn't sleep. The faces from the photographs hovered in her mind. She found herself imagining the Harpers in their final hours, driving down a lonely desert highway, headlights cutting through the dark, unaware they were being followed. By dawn, she made a decision. She would retrace their steps. 10 years might have passed, but the desert held secrets well. She called the Harpers' families first. The voices on the other end carried both surprise and hesitation. Emily's mother, Evelyn, broke down in tears when Claire explained about the camera. Daniel's brother, Mark, was less emotional, but his voice was sharp. "They told us everything was done," he said bitterly, "that there was nothing more to look for." "Now you're telling me there were photos this whole time?" "I'm telling you I'm not done," Claire replied firmly. By the time she hung up, she had both families' reluctant blessing to proceed, but she also had a growing sense of dread. Families always wanted closure, but closure wasn't always what the truth provided. She packed her bag that afternoon, a map of New Mexico and Arizona, a tape recorder, her old Nikon, and the envelope of photographs. By evening, she was driving west out of Albuquerque, following the same roads the Harpers had taken in. The desert stretched endlessly on both sides, sun-bleached and silent. She stopped at the same motel, long since rebranded but still standing, and requested the same room the Harpers had stayed in. The clerk raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. That night, sitting on the edge of the bed, Claire pulled out the photographs again. Her eyes returned to the campfire image, the faceless figure, smoke curling around it like shrouds. She studied the background closely, noting the outline of jagged rocks, a sliver of canyon wall. It wasn't much, but it was something. She circled the shape on the print with a red pen. Canyon del Muerto, maybe, or somewhere nearby. A knock rattled her door just after midnight. She froze, pulse hammering. When she opened it, the hallway was empty. Only a folded piece of paper lay on the floor. In block letters, hastily scrawled, it read, "Stop looking. They never left." Her blood ran cold, and that was when she realized someone else was still watching. The note sat in her hands, its black marker letters bleeding slightly on cheap motel stationery. Claire read it again, her heart still hammering. "Stop looking. They never left." She stepped into the hallway, scanning in both directions. Empty. The dim fluorescent lights flickered overhead, buzzing faintly. Whoever had left the note was already gone. She slipped on her shoes, adrenaline driving her, and jogged to the parking lot. The night air was dry and sharp, the desert sky vast and endless. Her rental car sat alone, under the yellow glow of a street lamp. No one else was around. She checked the doors, locked. She checked the trunk, closed. But her unease only deepened. Back in her room, she slid the chain across the door and sat down on the bed. She laid the note beside the photographs, studying them under the weak lamplight. They never left. Did that mean the Harpers never left the desert? That their bodies, or what was left of them, still lay hidden somewhere in the sands? Or was it meant more literally? Something about the phrasing felt deliberate, like a riddle. Sleep was impossible. She kept replaying the sequence in her mind. The camera, the photographs, the faceless figure, the note. Whoever had left that message knew she was here, knew what she was investigating, and wanted her to stop, which meant she was close. By dawn, she had made up her mind. She would follow the clue in the photograph. The image of the campfire haunted her, Emily and Daniel blurred in the foreground, the faceless figure looming behind them. But it wasn't just the figure that mattered. It was the landscape. In the corner of the shot, Jagged stone formations rose like teeth, their shapes distinctive enough that someone familiar with the region could identify them. Claire traced them on the photo with her pen. Canyon del Muerto. She was sure of it. It was a desolate place, remote, treacherous in summer heat, not a place tourists typically wandered without a guide. And yet, 10 years ago, the Harpers had gone there. Claire drove out of town that morning, her eyes fixed on the endless highway ahead. The desert rolled out on both sides, vast and indifferent, the kind of place that could swallow people whole and never give them back. By late afternoon, she reached the turnoff for Canyon del Muerto. The road narrowed, the asphalt giving way to dirt and gravel. She parked near an abandoned ranger station and got out. The silence pressed against her ears. Not even a bird called. She slung her camera over her shoulder, pocketed her flashlight, and started walking. The canyon walls rose higher the deeper she went, red and jagged, shadows stretching long as the sun dipped lower. Her boots crunched on loose stone. Every so often she stopped, comparing the rocks to the photograph. Slowly, a sense of recognition built, and then she found it. The outcropping from the photo, the same jagged teeth of stone silhouetted against the fading sky. Her pulse quickened. This was it, the place where that campfire had burned 10 years ago. She scanned the ground. Dust, rocks, scraggly bushes. No sign of a fire pit, no remnants of logs or ash. Time and wind had erased the surface, but her instincts told her something still lingered here. She crouched, brushing aside loose sand. A few charred fragments surfaced, blackened wood, brittle and fragile. Her chest tightened. The fire had been real. As she pocketed one of the fragments, a sound echoed down the canyon, a soft crunch. Footsteps. She froze, every nerve alert. Slowly, she turned her head. At the far edge of the outcropping, half shrouded by shadow, a figure stood, tall, still, watching. Her throat went dry. "Hello?" she called, her voice steady but tight. The figure didn't move. She raised her flashlight, flicked it on. The beam cut through the gloom, but the figure was gone. Her stomach dropped. She hurried back toward her car, pulse racing, the canyon walls seeming to close in around her. Whoever was following her wasn't trying to hide anymore. They wanted her to know. When she reached the ranger station, her car was exactly as she'd left it. She checked the locks, intact. She slid behind the wheel, hands trembling, and started the engine. Only when she pulled onto the main road did she notice something on the passenger seat. Another envelope. Her chest constricted. She hadn't left anything there. With shaking hands, she opened it. Inside was a single Polaroid. It showed the same canyon she had just left, the same jagged rocks. And in the center of the photo, the faint outline of two figures sitting close together, blurred but unmistakable. Daniel and Emily Harper. Written at the bottom, in smeared ink, were three words, "Still here." Wait. Claire gripped the steering wheel, her breath shallow. Someone was playing a game, a cruel one. But deep down, she knew this wasn't just a game. The Harpers had left something behind in that canyon. And someone, whether to warn her or to taunt her, wanted her to find it. She pressed the accelerator harder, the desert road stretching endlessly before her. For the first time in years, Claire Morrison felt real fear, not of failure, not of death, but of the truth. Because the deeper she went, the clearer it became. The Harpers hadn't simply vanished, they had been taken. And now, 10 years later, she was being drawn into the same snare. The Polaroid sat on the passenger seat, like a weight. Claire glanced at it again. The faint blur of Daniel and Emily Harper, sitting side by side in the canyon, where she had just stood. The image didn't look old. It looked recent. Too crisp, too immediate. The way the ink smeared at the bottom suggested it had been developed not long ago. Her mind raced. Either someone had faked the photo to scare her, or and she hated even considering this. The Harpers had somehow been alive far longer than anyone believed. She drove through the night, headlights cutting through the emptiness, every mile pulling her deeper into questions she couldn't answer. By the time she reached the small town of Chenli, near the entrance to Canyon de Chelly, her nerves were raw. She checked into a motel and locked herself inside, laying out the photographs and notes across the bedspread. She replayed everything. The original disposable camera, developed after 10 years. The note at her motel, stop looking. They never left. The footsteps in the canyon, and now this Polaroid, too fresh to be a relic. She rubbed her temples. Someone was orchestrating this, feeding her breadcrumbs, controlling the pace. But who? And why? After all these years, her first lead was obvious. She needed to know more about the Harpers' original trip. The next morning, she began with the rental records. It took hours of calls, but eventually, she found someone willing to dig through the archives of the car rental company in Albuquerque. Yes, the Harpers had rented a red Jeep Cherokee in June of 1993. Yes, it had been due back on July 3rd. No, it was never returned. The file ended there. Was it ever reported stolen? Claire asked over the crackling line. The clerk hesitated. Funny thing. Looks like the theft report was drafted but never officially filed. Claire frowned. By who? Doesn't say. Just the initials MH in the margin. Mark Harper, Daniel's brother. Claire leaned back, the receiver heavy in her hand. Why would Daniel's own brother interfere with the rental report? Unless he had known more than he'd ever admitted. That afternoon, Claire tracked down Mark Harper's address in Ohio. He still lived there, still ran his small construction business, still carried the weight of his brother's disappearance. She called him. You again, Mark said gruffly. I told you, detective. The case is dead. Those photos don't change anything, don't they? Claire asked evenly. Because I just learned you intervened in the Jeep rental report. You made sure the theft file was never finalized. Silence crackled on the other end. Finally, Mark said, You don't understand what you're stepping into. Then explain it to me. Another pause. Then his voice dropped. Daniel called me the night before he disappeared. Claire's pen froze above her notebook. He called you. He said they were being followed, that someone didn't want them going to the canyon. He sounded afraid, like I'd never heard him before. He asked me to cover for him. If something happened, said the Jeep might never come back. Claire's pulse quickened. And you didn't tell the police this? They would have written it off as paranoia. And then, his voice cracked. Then he never called again. Why keep this secret? Mark's answer was almost a whisper. Because the man who followed them, he called me too. Claire's skin prickled. Who? Mark's voice hardened. Don't dig any deeper, detective. They never left. And if you keep chasing them, neither will you. The line went dead. Claire sat frozen. The receiver pressed to her ear long after the dial tone had gone flat. The man who followed them. Her thoughts snapped back to the faceless figure in the photo, to the footsteps in the canyon, to the envelope left in her car. Someone was still following. That night, she returned to the photographs. She spread them out on the motel floor, arranging them in sequence. Emily at the dinosaur statue, Daniel at the Jeep, the blurred shots at night, the campfire, the faceless figure, and finally, the dark frame with the slash of light. She stared at that last one. For the first time, she noticed something she hadn't before. Faint shapes at the edges of the darkness. Stone, rough-hewn, not just darkness. A wall. She magnified the print with her camera lens. The line of light wasn't random. It was sunlight, filtering through a crack in stone. They hadn't been outside. They had been inside something, a cavern. Her chest tightened. The canyon wasn't just where the Harpers disappeared. It was where they'd been kept. The next morning, she hired a local guide, an older Navajo man named Thomas, who knew the canyons better than anyone alive. She showed him the campfire photo. He studied it for a long time before speaking. I know this place. It's not Canyon del Muerto. It's deeper, a hollow near Spider Rock, where tourists don't go. Can you take me there? Claire asked. He hesitated, his dark eyes narrowing. Bad things happened in that hollow. People talk about voices at night. Lights where no fire burns. I don't go there anymore. I'll pay double your rate, Claire pressed. But Thomas shook his head. It's not about money. It's about what you'll find. Some things don't want to be uncovered. Claire leaned forward, lowering her voice. A couple disappeared there 10 years ago. I need to know what happened. Thomas looked at her for a long time, then sighed. Tomorrow, sunrise. But once we reach the hollow, you're on your own. That night, Claire barely slept. She dreamed of the Harpers, sitting in darkness, waiting. She woke to the sound of knocking, 3 deliberate raps at her door. Her heart seized. She grabbed her flashlight, crept to the door, and yanked it open. The hallway was empty, but taped to the doorframe was another Polaroid. This one showed her, standing at her motel window, taken from outside. Her breath came shallow and fast. She tore the photo down, hands shaking. The message at the bottom was scrawled in the same smeared ink. You're already part of it. Her fear hardened into determination. Whoever was trying to scare her had just confirmed it. She was close. Too close for them to stay hidden much longer. The horizon bled orange and pink when Claire met Thomas at the ranger station. He waited beside an old pickup truck, the kind that looked like it had already outlived 2 owners. He gave her a curt nod, his lined face unreadable. You're certain? He asked. Yes, Claire said, her voice steadier than she felt. He drove them deep into the canyon. The walls rose higher, red stone catching the dawn light. Silence weighed heavy between them, broken only by the growl of the engine and the crunch of tires on gravel. Claire kept glancing at the Polaroid she had found on her door. The grainy image of herself at the motel window seemed to burn in her pocket. After nearly an hour, Thomas pulled over. From here we walk, he said. He slung a small satchel over his shoulder and started toward a narrow trail that curved between boulders. Claire followed, the dry air stinging her throat. They hiked in silence, winding deeper into the canyon, until the trail opened into a hollow, a hidden amphitheater, carved by centuries of wind and rain. Claire stopped short. It was the place from the photo, the jagged teeth of rock, the shadowed alcove at the far wall. This is it, she whispered. Thomas didn't answer. He scanned the hollow with a weariness that bordered on fear. Finally, he gestured toward the alcove. That's where your answers wait. I go no further. Claire turned to him. Why not? He shook his head. My grandfather told me stories about this place. People who went in didn't come back. Sometimes their voices did, carried on the wind, but never their bodies. He fixed her with a steady gaze. If you go in, don't expect rescue. Then he turned and walked back the way they had come, leaving her alone. Claire swallowed hard and stepped forward. The hollow was eerily silent. Even the wind seemed to die at the threshold. Her boots crunched on the dry earth as she approached the alcove. The closer she came, the more she realized the alcove wasn't just a shadow. It was an opening, a narrow crack in the rock, tall enough to step through. She raised her flashlight and shined it inside. Stone walls stretched into darkness. A passage. Her heart thudded as she ducked inside. The air grew cooler, damp. The beam of her flashlight caught rough carvings on the walls, lines, shapes, symbols etched into stone, circles within circles, crosshatch patterns like nets. She ran her fingers across one carving and recoiled. The grooves were warm, as if freshly made. The passage sloped downward, deeper into the earth. Claire forced herself to keep moving, every step echoing louder in the confined space. She told herself to breathe evenly, to focus, to remember she wasn't here to chase ghosts, but evidence. After what felt like minutes, the passage widened into a chamber. Her breath caught. The chamber was large, the ceiling lost in shadows. In the center sat the remnants of a camp, rusted folding chairs, a half-collapsed tent, empty water bottles, coated in dust, a circle of stones, still blackened with ash marked where a fire had once burned. She stepped closer, her flashlight trembling in her hand. This was no coincidence. This was the Harper's camp. On the ground, she found a pair of shoes, women's hiking boots, the soles cracked, laces frayed. Nearby, a Polaroid camera lay half buried in dust. She picked it up with shaking hands. Inside, the click of something shifting echoed faintly. Her light swept across the chamber, and she froze. On the far wall, dozens of photographs had been tacked into the stone with rusted nails, faded, curling at the edges. All Polaroids. She moved closer, her stomach twisting. Each photo showed the same thing. Daniel and Emily Harper, eating at the campfire, smiling at each other, sitting in the folding chairs, but their faces blurred more with each image, distorted as if the camera lens had warped reality. In the last row, their faces were nothing but smears of light. Claire's pulse thundered. Who had taken these? A sound behind her made her spin. Footsteps. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice cracking against the stone walls. No answer. Her flashlight flickered. She slapped it, and the beam steadied. A figure stood at the edge of the chamber, tall, motionless. Its face was swallowed in shadow. Claire's throat tightened. She raised her light, but the figure melted into darkness, gone in the blink of an eye. Her chest heaved. She backed toward the passage, but something on the ground caught her eye. A journal, its cover cracked with age. She bent and picked it up. The name on the front made her breath hitch. Daniel Harper. She flipped it open. The first entries were mundane. Notes about the trip, jokes about Emily insisting on extra film, sketches of canyon walls. But further in, the handwriting grew jagged. Frantic. "We're being watched. Emily swears she hears voices in the walls. The man is back. He doesn't speak. He just stands there. We can't find the way out." The passage closes behind us. The last entry made her blood run cold. "If anyone finds this, tell them we never left. Tell them the walls breathe." The journal slipped in her trembling hands. She stuffed it into her bag and bolted for the passage. Her boots scraped against stone as she scrambled upward. The air felt thicker, pressing against her lungs. Behind her, she heard it, 3 knocks, deliberate and steady, echoing through the chamber. She didn't look back. Bursting out into the daylight, she collapsed against the canyon wall, gasping for breath. The hollow looked unchanged, silent, indifferent. But when she staggered toward the trail, she froze. On the ground outside the alcove lay another Polaroid. It showed her, kneeling in the chamber, holding Daniel's journal. Her stomach dropped. She hadn't seen anyone take it. Scrawled across the bottom in smeared ink were the words, "Now you've taken their place." Claire staggered back, the canyon spinning around her. For the first time, she understood. The Harpers hadn't just disappeared. They'd been consumed by something older, something that still lingered in the stone. And now, by stepping into their hollow, she had entered the same story. And whoever had been leaving her those Polaroids wasn't documenting the past. They were documenting her. Claire stumbled down the trail, every nerve in her body alight with dread. The Polaroid in her hand felt like it burned, the smeared ink still damp beneath her fingers. She shoved it into her bag with the journal, clutching the strap as if it were the only tether keeping her grounded. The sun was rising higher, painting the canyon in gold, but to her it felt no less ominous. Thomas was waiting at the base of the trail, leaning against his truck. The moment he saw her pale, trembling figure, he stiffened. "You went inside." Claire nodded, breathless. She could hardly speak, but the terror in her eyes told him everything. He shook his head and muttered something in Navajo under his breath. A prayer, or maybe a curse. "What did you see?" he asked finally. Claire pulled the journal from her bag and handed it over. Thomas opened it carefully, flipping through the pages. His expression darkened as he read the final entries. "The walls breathe," he whispered. "You knew about this," Claire said hoarsely. "Didn't you?" Thomas shut the book, his gaze heavy with something between guilt and warning. "There are stories of this canyon, places where the earth is thin, where time bends. Some believe spirits live there. Others think it's something older, something that doesn't belong to this world." He handed the journal back. "The Harpers walked into it. Now you've touched it too." Claire shook her head, forcing herself to steady her breathing. "It's not supernatural. Someone's been following me, leaving Polaroids, watching. This is a person, not a ghost." Thomas studied her for a long moment. "Maybe," he said, "but whoever it is, they don't want you to stop. They want you to keep walking deeper." The ride back to town was silent. Claire stared out the window, gripping the journal in her lap, every bump in the road making her jump. By the time she returned to her motel, her body felt hollowed out with exhaustion. She collapsed on the bed and finally let herself drift into sleep. When she woke, the room was dark. The clock read something was wrong. Her Polaroids, which she had left scattered on the nightstand, were gone. Claire bolted upright, scanning the room. Her heart hammered as she fumbled for the light. The bulb flickered once, then died, leaving her in shadow. She reached for her flashlight, but before she could switch it on, a faint scratching sound echoed from the door. Slow, deliberate. She froze. The scratching stopped. Then came 3 knocks. Her throat tightened. The same rhythm she had heard in the chamber. With trembling hands, she flipped on the flashlight and lunged for the door. She flung it open. The hallway was empty, but taped to the outside was another Polaroid. Her blood went cold. It showed her sleeping in her motel bed, taken from inside the room. She staggered back, slamming the door shut. Her breaths came in sharp, ragged bursts. Someone had been here. Someone had stood over her while she slept. Her eyes darted to her bag. She unzipped it and rifled through the contents. The journal was still there. So was the Polaroid she had found at the alcove. But the rest, every other photo, was missing. Her stomach dropped. Whoever was toying with her now had them all. The next morning, she checked out of the motel and drove straight to the Chinle sheriff's office. She slapped the journal onto the desk of Sheriff Cole Ramirez, a heavy-set man with a weathered face and sharp eyes that had seen too much. "Detective Winters," he said slowly, thumbing through the journal. "You've been busy. You don't understand," Claire said urgently. "The Harpers didn't just vanish. They were trapped in that canyon. Someone was watching them, taking photos. And now," she broke off, her voice catching, "now they're watching me." Ramirez leaned back, studying her carefully. "You realize what you're saying? That after 10 years, someone's still out there playing this game?" "I'm not saying it's a game," Claire snapped. "I'm saying it's a pattern. Someone wants to keep this going. They left me this." She shoved the latest Polaroid across the desk. Ramirez's jaw tightened as he studied it. This was taken in your room? Claire nodded. He exhaled through his nose, rubbing his temples. All right, I'll have my deputies sweep the motel. But if someone's tailing you this close, they're good. Too good. He tapped the journal. And this? If it's genuine, it means we're not just dealing with disappearances. We're dealing with entrapment. Maybe worse. Claire sat forward. Then help me stop it. Before more people vanish. Ramirez hesitated, then leaned in. There's something you should know. Back in '93, when the Harpers went missing, there was another case. A local girl disappeared from her family's ranch 2 weeks after the Harpers. Same area. Never found. Claire's skin prickled. Why wasn't this connected before? Ramirez gave her a tired smile. Because back then, no one wanted to believe the canyon could swallow people whole. Easier to blame runaways, car accidents, anything but the truth. Claire's mind reeled. The Harpers hadn't been the only ones. Whoever, or whatever was behind this, had taken others too. That night, Ramirez arranged for her to stay in a safe house on the edge of town. But safe was the last word she'd use. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being herded, pushed exactly where her stalker wanted her to go. Sleep didn't come easy. When it did, it came with dreams, dark tunnels, faceless figures, the sound of film winding in the dark. She woke before dawn, sweat soaking her clothes. On the table beside her bed sat another Polaroid. Her hand trembled as she picked it up. It showed the hollow, and in the center of the chamber stood two figures, holding hands, Daniel and Emily Harper, alive. Her stomach flipped. She whispered into the silence, "No, that's not possible." But the evidence was in her hands. Not a memory, not a relic, a photograph that had to have been taken recently. The message scrawled at the bottom twisted her gut into knots. They never left. Neither will you. Claire sat frozen, the photo trembling in her grip. For the first time, she wondered if this wasn't about solving the Harpers' disappearance at all. Maybe it was about replacing them. The Polaroid shook in Claire's hand. Long after dawn, lit the horizon. She sat rigid in the safe house, her eyes locked on the photograph of Daniel and Emily Harper standing together in the hollow. The note scrawled beneath it, "They never left, neither will you," looped in her mind like a curse. By the time Sheriff Ramirez arrived, she was pacing the room, the photo clutched so tightly her knuckles blanched. He scanned her face, then the Polaroid, and his expression darkened. "This isn't a joke," he muttered. "Of course it's not," Claire snapped. "Somebody wants me in that canyon, and they're using the Harpers to lure me back." Ramirez lowered himself into a chair, the springs creaking. Or worse, they're not luring you. They're showing you what's waiting. Claire's chest tightened. "You think this picture is real? That they're alive?" Ramirez didn't answer immediately. He tapped the photo against his palm, studying it. "If it was faked, it's a damn convincing job. And whoever took it, they wanted you to see it. That makes you the next piece on their board." Claire leaned forward, her voice low. "Then we need to move before they do." Ramirez looked up at her, a weight in his gaze. "Detective, you're already in too deep. You've got something they want, and you've seen things no one was supposed to. If I were you, I'd leave tonight. Forget this place before it swallows you too." Claire shook her head. "That's not who I am. You've read the journal. You've seen the photos. If I walk away, I'll never stop wondering what happened. And neither will you." The sheriff exhaled, rubbing his temples. Finally, he stood. "Then we do it my way. We don't go in alone. I've got 2 deputies I trust. We'll bring gear, light, weapons. If there's something in that canyon, we'll drag it into the open." For the first time in days, Claire felt a flicker of relief, but it didn't last long. That night, she dreamed again. She stood in the hollow, her flashlight beam bouncing off the stone. The Harpers stood a few feet away, their hands clasped, their faces pale and blurred like the photos. They whispered her name in unison, their voices overlapping, echoing from the walls. Claire, Claire. She tried to run, but her feet sank into the ground, as though the canyon floor had turned to sand. She looked down, and dozens of Polaroids floated up from the earth. Images of her own face, distorted, screaming. She woke with a strangled gasp, drenched in sweat. The following evening, Ramirez, his deputies, and Claire set out for the hollow. They packed carefully: lanterns, radios, firearms, and extra batteries. Thomas, the guide, refused to join them, muttering that the canyon demanded a toll. One must stay, he warned, before disappearing back into the desert. By the time they reached the alcove, night had fallen. The desert was eerily quiet, the stars sharp and cold above them. Ramirez raised a hand, signaling for silence. They slipped inside, their lanterns throwing pale circles of light onto the stone walls. The passage sloped downward, just as Claire remembered, but this time the carvings on the walls seemed deeper, more pronounced. Circles within circles, lines that writhed under the lantern glow, as if alive. Claire forced her eyes forward, refusing to linger. When they entered the chamber, the air grew heavier, charged with a pressure that made her ears pop. The remnants of the Harpers' camp were still there, but now the folding chairs were upright, arranged neatly around the cold fire pit. Claire's chest tightened. Someone had been here since her last visit. Ramirez gestured to his deputies, who began sweeping the room. Claire's flashlight caught the wall, and her breath caught with it. The photographs. There were more of them now. Dozens more, tacked into the stone, with fresh nails. And at the center of the display was the most recent image. Claire herself, entering the chamber with Ramirez and his deputies. Her stomach flipped. "That's impossible," she whispered. One of the deputies swore under his breath. Ramirez's jaw clenched. "We're not alone." The sound came then. Footsteps, echoing faintly from the passage behind them. Slow, deliberate. Ramirez spun, gun raised. "Show yourself." Silence answered. Then came the knocks. 3. Steady, vibrating through the stone. Claire felt the sound in her chest, a rhythm older than words. The lanterns flickered, and then they appeared. At the far side of the chamber, just beyond the fire pit, Daniel and Emily Harper stepped into the light. Claire froze, her mind screaming at her to make sense of what she was seeing. They looked older than in the photographs, but not by much, as if time had slowed for them. Their clothes were ragged, but intact, their faces pale, their eyes unfocused yet locked on her. "Daniel, Emily." Claire's voice trembled. Emily tilted her head, a slow, unnatural motion. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered, her voice layered, as if more than one person spoke through her. One of the deputies cursed and raised his gun. Ramirez barked, "Hold fire." Daniel took a step forward, his movements stiff, like a puppet pulled by unseen strings. "We waited," he said, his voice a hollow echo. "The walls don't let you go. They only trade." Claire's stomach turned cold. Trade? Emily's eyes clouded empty, fixed on hers. "One must stay." The chamber seemed to shudder. Dust rained from the ceiling. The photographs on the wall rippled as if stirred by wind, though no air moved. Claire clutched the journal tighter against her chest. "This isn't you," she whispered. "This is whatever's inside this canyon. It's using you." Emily's lips curved into a faint, unnatural smile. "Then it will use you too." The lanterns blew out. Chaos erupted. Shouts, the clatter of boots, the crack of gunfire. swallowed by the chamber's impossible acoustics. Claire fumbled for her flashlight, heart hammering. When the beam finally fired, it revealed only emptiness. The Harpers were gone. So was one of Ramirez's deputies. The others called his name, their voices ricocheting off the stone, but there was no answer. Claire's skin crawled as she swept the chamber with her light. On the wall where the photographs hung, a new one had appeared, the missing deputy. His face blurred, his eyes wide with terror. Claire's throat tightened. "It's taking them," she whispered. Ramirez swore, pulling her toward the passage. "We're leaving. Now." They stumbled back the way they had come, the knocks chasing them through the darkness, closer with every step. Claire's flashlight beam shook wildly over the carvings, which now seemed to pulse, the lines flexing like muscles under the stone. By the time they burst out into the night air, the stars above looked wrong, slightly shifted, as if the sky itself had twisted. Ramirez leaned against the canyon wall, gasping, his remaining deputy pale and silent. Claire's hands trembled as she pulled the journal from her bag. She flipped to the last page again, rereading Daniel's frantic scrawl. "If anyone finds this, tell them we never left. Tell them the walls breathe." But now there was more. New words written beneath, in ink that hadn't been there before. "Tell them someone always stays." Claire's breath caught. She looked up at Ramirez, who was staring at her with wide eyes. He had seen it too. The canyon hadn't just taken the Harpers. It had claimed countless others. And now it wanted one of them. And Claire knew, with bone-deep certainty, that if they didn't stop it, it would keep taking until there was no one left to tell the story. The desert night pressed down like a weight as Claire stared at the journal's final words. "Tell them someone always stays." The ink gleamed faintly under her flashlight beam, too fresh to be decades old. She ran her thumb over the page, half expecting it to smear. But it was already dry, impossible, yet real. Sheriff Ramirez slammed the cover shut. "We're done here. You hear me? We're not going back into that canyon. Not for the Harpers. Not for anyone. That place eats people alive." But Claire shook her head. "You don't understand. It doesn't just eat them. It traps them. And it wants us to spread the story. That's why the Polaroids keep appearing. Why the journal's been waiting. It needs someone to look. Someone to tell it." The remaining deputy cursed under his breath, his face pale. "Then why us? Why now?" Claire swallowed hard, staring past them at the dark horizon. "Because I'm already part of it. I've been since the moment I touched that camera." The three of them packed in silence and drove back toward town, headlights cutting thin beams across the endless sand. Claire sat in the back seat, her mind spinning, the canyon walls replaying in her memory, the knocks, the photographs, the Harper's hollow eyes, and beneath it all, a single truth gnawed at her: one must stay. When they reached Ramirez's office, it was nearly dawn. The town was still, the streets empty. Ramirez ushered them inside, locking the door. Claire laid the journal on his desk, flipping it open again. But this time, there was something new. Another Polaroid lay pressed between the pages, one she hadn't seen before. Her stomach dropped. It showed the three of them, Ramirez, the deputy, and Claire, standing in that very office. Claire's face was turned toward the camera, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open. The angle was impossible. No one else had been in the room, and yet here it was. Beneath the image, in the same smeared ink, were three words: "Choose who stays." The deputy staggered back, his chair clattering to the floor. "No, no, no, no. This isn't happening." Ramirez snatched the photo, his jaw clenched tight. "It's trying to pit us against each other," Claire whispered, "or force us to decide." The room seemed to grow colder. Somewhere in the distance, faint and muffled, came the sound of a train whistle, low, mournful, and utterly out of place in the desert. Ramirez's eyes flicked to the window, but the street outside was empty. The deputy snapped. I didn't sign up for this. I'm not staying here to die for some cursed canyon. If one of us has to. He cut himself off, glancing between Ramirez and Claire, panic etched in his features. Claire rose slowly, her hand flat on the journal. No one has to die. That's what it wants to make us believe the only way forward is sacrifice. But maybe there's another way. Ramirez frowned. Like what? Claire hesitated. The journal. The photos. They're not just warnings. They're records. The canyon feeds on memory. On people being seen. Maybe it doesn't want a body. Maybe it wants a witness. The sheriff shook his head. You're saying it wants a story? Yes, Claire said. Her voice trembled, but the conviction grew as she spoke. That's why the Polaroids keep showing up. That's why Daniel's journal survived untouched for 15 years. The canyon doesn't erase, it archives. And if someone tells the story, if it spreads, maybe that's its way of surviving. Not through taking us, but through being remembered. The deputy spat on the floor. That's insane. But even as he said it, the knocks began. 3, loud and clear, from the wall behind Ramirez's desk. All 3 of them froze. The knocks came again, then again, louder. Dust sifted from the ceiling. Claire's chest seized as she turned. The wall was bare, but her eyes caught movement in the corner. A Polaroid slid out from beneath the plaster, as though pushed through by an unseen hand. It fluttered to the floor. Ramirez bent to pick it up. His hand shook as he turned it over. His face drained of color. It's you, he whispered, staring at Claire. She took the photo from him with trembling hands. It was her, standing alone in the hollow, her flashlight in one hand, the journal in the other. Behind her, the Harpers sat at the fire pit, smiling faintly. The caption below was unmistakable. She stayed. Claire's throat tightened. It's already chosen me. The deputy backed toward the door, panic breaking loose. Then let it take you. I'm not part of this. He fumbled for the lock, but the door wouldn't budge. He kicked it, yanked it, cursed, but it held fast, unmoving. Ramirez's voice cracked like a whip. Stop. It wants us afraid. That's how it wins. But Claire knew. Deep down, the canyon wasn't bluffing. She felt it in her bones, the same way she'd felt its pull the night she first found the camera. It wasn't after the sheriff. It wasn't after the deputy. It was after her. Her hands trembled as she pressed the photo flat against the journal. If I go back, if I let it take me, maybe it stops. Ramirez grabbed her arm, his grip fierce. No, you don't get to decide that. Not alone. Claire met his eyes. I've been alone since I opened that camera, and you know it. The room fell silent, except for the faint tick of the wall clock and the deputy's ragged breathing. Then came the sound again, the train whistle, closer this time, impossibly close. Claire closed the journal, tucked it under her arm, and walked to the door. The lock clicked open at her touch. Where are you going? Ramirez demanded. To finish it, she said. The deputy refused to move, his back pressed to the wall. Ramirez, after a long moment, followed her out into the desert night. The whistle guided them, not loud, not urgent, but steady, pulling them toward the canyon. The stars shifted again, brighter, colder. By the time they reached the hollow, Claire felt an unnatural calm settle over her, as though the desert itself had been holding its breath. She stepped inside alone. Ramirez tried to follow, but the passage sealed, the stone sliding shut, as though it had never been open. His shouts faded behind her. The chamber waited. The fire pit glowed faintly, embers that hadn't burned in years, sparking to life. The Harpers sat at its edge, their hands intertwined, their faces soft and strange. Claire walked forward, setting the journal on the table beside the Polaroids. Her flashlight flickered once, then died, leaving only the glow of the fire. Emily Harper spoke, her voice layered, both hers and not hers. You came. Claire nodded. I tell the story. That's the trade. Daniel tilted his head. Then the walls pulsed, breathing, the photographs shivering in their places. Claire reached out, her fingers brushing the final page of the journal. She whispered, No, I don't stay. The story does. And with that, she tossed the journal into the fire. The flames roared, the chamber trembling, the Polaroids curling and blackening on the walls. The Harpers screamed, not in pain, but in release, their bodies dissolving into smoke and light. The knocks rose to a deafening crescendo, then fell silent. When the fire guttered out, the chamber was empty. No chairs, no photographs, no Harpers, just Claire, standing alone in the darkness. And then she was outside. The desert air filled her lungs, sharp and real. Ramirez ran toward her, eyes wide with disbelief. You're alive. Claire held out her empty hands. It's done. But she knew it wasn't. Not really. The canyon was quiet for now. But the story would spread. Someone would find the ashes of the journal, or another photograph. And when they did, the cycle would begin again. She had only bought time. As dawn broke over the desert, Claire whispered to herself, At least they'll know. At least the Harpers are free. And somewhere, carried on the morning wind, came the faintest echo of a knock. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chilling mystery. There's always another story waiting in the shadows, and you'll want to be here when it surfaces.